It was a dreadful night, pitch black, full of strong winds as the Essex cut through the waves, its wooden hull groaning under the relentless push of the ocean. Owen Chase, first mate of the doomed vessel, had seen many tempests in his time, but something about this voyage gnawed at him, a sense of doom that no sailor's superstition could explain. The ship's timbers creaked as if whispering warnings of the horrors to come, but no man aboard truly understood the nightmare that awaited them. The journey was cursed from the beginning. The ship was battered by furious storms that threatened to shatter it into splinters. Waves as tall as cathedrals crashed upon them, forcing the crew to bail water with frantic hands as the howling gales threatened to rip the sails from their masts. Then, as if Neptune himself had deemed their voyage an abomination, an act of foolishness sealed their fate further. A crewman, young and reckless, decided to set a small fire on a remote island as a prank. But the flames licked hungrily at the dry vegetation, spreading with terrifying speed. Soon, the entire island was ablaze, a nightmarish inferno illuminating the dark waters as the men scrambled back to the ship, their retreat choked with smoke. The fire consumed everything, including the possibility of finding refuge should they ever need it. The men whispered about omens, about wrathful gods of the deep, about the shadow of death that seemed to follow their voyage like a vulture waiting to feast. Then came the beast. The attack was sudden. A massive sperm whale, its eyes black pits of unfathomable rage, surfaced from the depths like a demon conjured from a watery hell. It loomed over the sea like a creature from an ancient nightmare, its flesh marked with scars from battles long past. Then, without warning, it struck. It rammed the Essex with such force that the ship quaked. Wood splintered, the mast creaked like the snapping bones of the damned, and men were thrown into chaos. The monstrous Leviathan struck again, its massive head crashing into the ship with a sound like cannon fire, breaching the hull and sealing their fate. As the Essex took on water, the crew rushed to their emergency boats, their hands trembling as they loaded whatever supplies they could grab. They watched, helpless, as their ship, their home, their last refuge, was swallowed by the relentless sea. Then, the real nightmare began. Drifting in open water, their hope dwindled with each passing day. The sun, an unrelenting demon, scorched their skin until it blistered. The thirst was maddening, so much so that some began drinking their own urine in desperation. Their lips cracked, their tongues swelled, and their vision blurred with the torment of dehydration. The sea, stretching endlessly in every direction, became their prison, its cruel waves lulling them into a slow, agonizing death. But nothing compared to the horror that awaited them. When their rations finally ran out, starvation twisted their minds. The men, once proud and strong, became gaunt shadows of themselves, their ribs pressing against their skin like the bars of a cage. They began to hear voices in the wind, whispers of the drowned, murmurs of the dead calling them down beneath the waves. Desperation clawed at them, turning their thoughts to the unthinkable. Then, as if fate itself sought to quicken their descent into hell, another whale attacked their fragile boats. Though they survived, they were left with even fewer resources. The men were faced with a choice: succumb to hunger or do the unthinkable. And so, they turned on the dead. A man in Chase's boat fell into violent convulsions, his eyes rolling back as his body shuddered uncontrollably before he succumbed. The crew stared at the corpse in silence, their hunger a beast of its own, gnawing at their insides. The decision was silent, unspoken but understood. With grim resolve, they separated the limbs from his body, slicing away the flesh. Chase wrote later, his hand trembling as he recounted their actions. "We opened the body, took out the heart, and then closed it again, sewed it up as decently as we could, and committed it to the sea. The heart, the liver, the muscles, they devoured it all. And for the first time in days, their stomachs were full. But death was not finished with them yet. More men perished, their bodies sacrificed to the macabre ritual of survival. The taste of human flesh became their only salvation, and the line between life and monstrosity blurred. At night, they dreamt of feasting on each other, their subconscious taunting them with the promise of more meat, more sustenance. On another boat, Captain Pollard and his remaining crew drew lots to determine who would be eaten next. The grim burden fell upon Owen Coffin, Pollard's own cousin. The young man accepted his fate with a quiet nod, his face ghostly pale. Pollard, grief-stricken, protested, offered himself in his place, but the decision had been made. Coffin was shot, and his body became the next meal for the starving sailors. Days bled into each other, the sea an endless expanse of hunger and horror. The last survivors, emaciated and half-mad, clung to life even as they gnawed on the bones of their fallen comrades, sucking out the marrow like desperate animals. Their dreams became fevered nightmares, haunted by the faces of the dead, their whispers carried on the salt-laden wind. They awoke to the sensation of phantom hands clutching at their throats, the eyes of their victims watching from just beneath the water surface. The ocean, once their home, had become a monstrous abyss that devoured their souls one by one. When rescue finally came, it was not a moment of triumph, but of wretched despair. Chase's boat was found first, its 3 skeletal survivors barely clinging to life. Pollard's boat, discovered soon after, held only 2 men, Pollard and Charles Ramsdell, both reduced to hollow-eyed specters of their former selves. Even as they were pulled aboard the American ship Dauphin, their fingers remained tightly clutched around the bones of their dead, their teeth still stained with the remnants of their last, unspeakable meal. They had survived, but at what cost? The tale of the Essex became legend, a story whispered in the dark corners of seafaring taverns, a cautionary tale of the abyss that lies not in the sea, but in the human soul itself. And the whale, Moby Dick, as he would be later immortalized, was more than just a creature of the deep. He was vengeance. He was fate. He was the harbinger of doom that had ensured no man aboard the Essex would ever truly escape the horror of what they had endured. For even in the embrace of dry land, the echoes of that cursed voyage would never cease. The survivors were forever marked, their nights tormented by dreams of hunger and blood, their waking moments haunted by the ghosts of their lost comrades. They had looked into the abyss, and the abyss had looked back, leaving them hollow, their souls adrift on an endless tide of horror and regret. The Essex was gone, swallowed by the abyss, but the darkness it left behind would never fade.